Welcome to the SaferAfrica e-learning course. My name is Davide Shingo-Usami. I'm a researcher in road safety, especially in topics like data collection and analysis and in-depth accident investigation. I work at the Research Center for Transport and Logistics of Sapienza University of Rome in Italy, and I will present session 4 of Module 1, that is Concepts of Road Safety. This session concerns models for understanding crashes, also known as accident causation models. This is the first module of the SaferAfrica e-learning course on road safety. Module 1 is focused on learning what is road safety, the magnitude and characteristics of the phenomenon, with a focus on the situation in Africa. How to approach to road safety, what are the main risk factors affecting crashes, occurrence and crash severity, and finally in this lesson we will talk about some models for understanding road crashes. The module is based on information from different courses put together for the EU SaferAfrica project. In this lesson, I'll introduce you to some important crash models for the investigation and the analysis of the causes of road crashes. In particular, we will examine the so-called sequential model and the add-on matrix. Consider you're traveling on a road and experience some traffic jam. After a while, you realize the traffic was due to a crash occurred earlier. When we travel by a crash scene, we often slow down to see what happened, but there's never much to see. Just consider what happens during a crash. What were the main events? How many impacts were there? Can you figure out what led to the crash? Are all crashes the same? We only see damaged or destroyed vehicles. There is probably police on the side of the road, maybe an ambulance, but all these do not tell us a story other than they collided. Thus, in order to obtain more details of a crash, an accident investigation must occur. This involves taking a look at the physics of the crash, the status of the drivers, and obtaining witness account. All the collected evidences of the crash should fit in a model able to explain the crash. Let's see what happens during a car crash. 2 seconds to impact, a driver is proceeding at 65 kilometers per hour on a priority road. He's approaching an intersection with obstructed view on his left side. He cannot see an oncoming vehicle on the cross street. So the driver will continue at the constant speed without evasive maneuver. 1 second to impact, the driver is still proceeding with the same speed and perceived a car coming from the cross street. A normal driver takes on average 1 second to react to this emergency situation. So in 1 second, at the speed of 65 kilometers per hour, the car moves forward for further 18 meters. Moreover, we need to consider the braking distance, further 21 meters. The driver has passed the point of no escape. He tries to stop, but does not have space enough to do so and slides into the vehicle on the cross street. Within the final second before impact, short-range sensors might detect a potential hazardous situation and do anything from simply precharging the vehicle brakes to actively apply them. Moving to the collision phase, let's have a look at the concept of the second and third collision. When the two cars collide, we have the crash. A motor vehicle crash consists of more than just the vehicle crashing into another object. There are 3 separate impacts in most crashes, not only one as most believe. The first collision is the vehicular collision. It occurs when the car impacts either with another car or a static object, such as a tree, barrier, or embankment. In a severe crash with another vehicle or other large objects, the car comes to an abrupt stop. The second collision is the human collision. At the moment of impact, occupants are still traveling at the vehicle's original speed. Anyone not secure with the will crash into a part of the vehicle's interior, other objects in the car, or other occupants. The third collision is the internal collision. After a person's body stops, internal organs still move forward. During this stage, these organs may collide into other internal organs or the skeletal system. Both the second and third collisions can cause serious injury or death. Therefore, your best protection against this additional collision is to fasten your seatbelt. When properly fastened, they distribute the G-forces, the gravitational forces, over the larger, stronger parts of the body that can better absorb these forces. They stretch a bit to allow your body to slow down to reduce the G-forces, thus protecting you. At the end of the collision, the vehicles separate and come to a final position. If the collision hasn't caused a rollover or a secondary impact, for instance with other vehicles, the crash is over. Occupants come to a full halt inside the cabin, and so do the structure designed to move with them. For many collisions, particularly side and rear impacts, this is often when the occupants first realize that a collision has occurred. Understanding crashes is like solving a jigsaw puzzle to see what is the final picture. The available data correspond to the pieces of the puzzle. With a simple puzzle with a few pieces, assembling the picture is very easy. But when pieces are missing and there are pieces that do not belong, like false information, the problem can be very hard to, or even impossible. To understand a car crash, we need to investigate the crash, trying to answer these three main questions. What was the dynamic of the vehicles and people involved in a road accident? To answer this question, we need an accident reconstruction, important to determine how the accident occurred. This usually involves to describe for each party involved the position on the road, the speed, the direction of travel, the acceleration or deceleration, etc. What were the consequences, in particular for the person involved, and why? To answer this question, we need an injury causation analysis. Crashes are all different, and there are many different factors that can affect the severity of the injury. The kind of crash, rollover, head-on, etc., the speed you are driving at, whether you've got airbags, whether you're wearing a seatbelt, whether you're the passenger or the driver, whether you hit a solid object or a car, and much more. Answering the third question helps us determining why an accident occurred. This is covered by an analysis of the causes. The basis of such kind of analysis is more or less implicitly an accident causation model, which can explain how accidents occur in a certain system. Accident causation models categorize the processes of the driving system and therefore supply a framework where failures occur and what the consequences are. These models are mainly developed to understand risk factors in accidents rather than to quantify them. Each accident is the subject of its own analysis. Aggregation is not in the main aim of this model. But why it's important to understand crash causation? Understanding accident causation is intrinsic to their successful prevention. Therefore, understanding how crashes occur is fundamental to establish intervention to prevent their occurrence. In road safety, the identification of the accident causes is one of the main approaches mainly used to improve road safety for many reasons. For instance, to fight the disease, it is necessary to be able to identify it, to quantify it, its magnitude, and to give its main characteristics, its frame. Because the problems are several, their kinds different and their interaction varied, accident causation allows to set up a diagnosis of the road safety problems where problems are ranked by order or frequency. These priorities can be very different as we are responsible for public health, car manufacturer and supplier to improve the safety of vehicles or road makers to build safer roads. Knowing the causes of crashes enable us to discern those crashes affected by a specific cause with crashes not affected because a countermeasure has been introduced. We can measure the effectiveness of safety action set up. With crash causation, we know also which part of the system failed, and we are able to know for each actor its responsibility as a part of the crash. Let's have a closer look to a crash causation model. The sequential model is one of the most used models for accident research activity. The crash is considered as a sequence of events and is divided into 4 phases: the driving phase, the rupture phase, the emergency phase, and the crash phase. The driving phase describes the situation in which the user is before the crash situation. The driver is performing the driving task in a given context without being overloaded with information. There is a balance between the demands and his ability to respond to this demand. The rupture phase is generated by an unexpected event interrupting the driving situation. This event could be an unforeseen pedestrian or a maneuver by another user, the presence of an infrastructure configuration which takes the driver by surprise or provokes a sudden high workload, and so on. We move from a stable situation to a situation where something has to be done to avoid the crash. The emergency phase is the period during which the driver must always react and perform a safe operation under time constraints and a limited space to avoid the crash. The rupture phase faces the driver with a new problem, and the emergency phase is the time space available to the driver to solve it. The range of solution depends on the environment in terms of obstacles, space available for an evasive action, or on the driver's skills, his experience and memory. Finally, the crash phase includes the crash and its consequences. It determines the severity of the accident in terms of material damage and injuries. The sequential model is very useful for a number of reasons. This separation into phases allows first to have a relevant structure of the data collection characterizing the accident process. Such a model is often used for qualitative and quantitative analysis because it shows how events and factors are related, giving also the opportunity to look for safety measures adapted for each phase. From the accident causation point of view, the information is mainly selected in the first 2 phases, the driving and the rupture phases. The pre-crash situation in which the vehicle is involved, the key event that could have contributed to convert a driving situation into a crash situation, the factors which explain directly or indirectly this event. However, in order to be able to apply such a model for accident causation analysis, it is necessary to realize a reconstruction of the accident. As an exercise, consider the following single vehicle crash. A truck entered a rural road after about 700 meters along a straight stretch. The truck ran off-road on the right side, continuing for a short distance on the shoulder and ending in a ditch, turning over on the right side. No braking traces were found on the road surface. The driver claims not to remember anything, to have left at midnight the previous day and to have stopped at a motorway gas station. In this exercise, you are asked to identify the four phases of the sequential model in this single vehicle crash. What do you think is the driving phase? What is the rapture phase? What is the emergency phase? What is the crash phase? Compare the results with other students and discuss any differences. The sequential model can be mixed with other models, mainly those dedicated to the components of the traffic system. Probably the most famous example is the model developed in the 70s by William Haddon. Haddon developed a two-dimensional matrix, the Haddon matrix, to help conceptualize a crash event. The 9 cells of the matrix represent time phases of the crash in addition to human, vehicle, and road factors related to the event. It is common to add a 4-column element that represents environmental conditions such as weather, socioeconomic condition, etc. The human factor refers to the person at risk of injury or accident, like a driver with a lack of training or poor driving experience, the vulnerability of a child, and so on. The vehicle factors define all factors linked to the vehicle which could have taken part in the accident, the injury severity, or which could have worsened the accident severity. The roadway and environmental factors include all the characteristics of the settings in which the accident takes place, or to the social and legal norms and practices in the culture and society at the time. For example, usage of child restraint, alcohol consumption, policies about licensing drivers, etc. This framework for analysis makes possible the identification of factors related to the human, vehicle, and environment within the 3 phases before, during, and after the crash that might be explanatory and contribute to injury prevention strategies. The Haddon matrix is a useful tool to organize a large number of potential accident causes in a meaningful way. Considering the crash contributing factors and what period of a crash event they relate to supports the process of identifying appropriate crash reduction strategies. The model can be completed upon examination of crashes for an area, for a set of location, single location, or a single crash under study. Let's have a look at this example, which may be constructed from a set of crashes in an urban area. The top left cell, pre-crash human, identify potential modification to the driver behavior that may reduce or increase the likelihood of a collision. As shown in the example table, it is alcohol consumption, speeding, cell phone using, or distraction. The Haddon matrix helps create order when we want to know which contributing factors influence a crash and which period of the crash the factors influence. The factors listed are not intended to be comprehensive. There are only examples. The matrix provides a range of potential issues that can be addressed through a variety of countermeasures, including education, enforcement, engineering, and emergency response solutions. So how do we use the Haddon matrix for countermeasure development? First of all, you need to determine the injury problem that requires an intervention from existing data. This could be done both by examining a crash site or by the analysis of crashes. The second step is to identify potential ideas for interventions and fill them into the cell of the add-on matrix. Finally, decide the best intervention options based upon effective strategies and practicalities to implement in your local situation. Now, let's go back to the track runoff route and take your time trying to describe the potential crash factors on the base of the head-on matrix. This homework assignment is meant to practice with the head-on matrix to help you approaching a road safety problem and identifying which factors can be changed and which change would have the greatest impact. Knowing this information helps you to start identifying possible interventions. Bear